On June 10th, a new update was pushed for the unstable branch of Project Zomboid, and as such we'll be covering everything that you need to know about the update. We'll go through the patch notes, condensing down all the bits you want to know and making it easier to digest so that you don't have to read through it all for yourself. If you do want to have a more detailed look, there is a link to the full patch notes down in the description. Now, one quick thing before we get going. I know a lot of you watching this video have been following the channel for quite some time, and I've got a bit of a life update for you. If you're not interested, you can skip right past this. I'll leave timestamps below. So it's been almost 3 weeks since I uploaded a video, and I figured you guys would want to know why. Basically, I am a homeowner now. I've moved into my first house. The move took a bit longer than expected because the house needed a bit more work than was first expected, and to top that off, I ended up having almost 2 weeks of no internet. So even though we had a video prepped and finished before I moved, it sadly didn't really make a dent. Anyway, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say a very big thank you to you guys, because I simply wouldn't be here without you, and believe me, that is not lost on me. Your support means the world, and thanks to that support, I've also been in touch with PC Specialist recently, who had this brand new custom PC waiting for me at the new place the day after I moved in, which is part of a sponsorship we're doing. It comes with an RTX 5080 and a Ryzen 9 950X 3D, which I am obviously really excited about. So you're going to see more of them in the next few weeks integrated into my content. Importantly though, this means for you guys that I'm going to be rendering my content at much higher bit rates, which means higher quality footage, and we're looking into getting 1440p hooked up as well in the future. I want to say a very genuine thank you to PC Specialist because they've been great from start to finish of this whole process. The PC runs like a dream, and I was able to configure everything I wanted to my specific needs using their configurator, which if you guys are interested in doing so yourself, you can build your own PC and use my link down in the description with the code ATOMIC30 for £30 off any configured system. Anyway, that's the life update and a heads up on our sponsor, so let's get into the patch notes now. Okay, so to kick things off, the zombie spawn heat map is now generated automatically on game start. But what does that really mean? Well, the developers have provided a detailed write-up of how this will affect the average playthrough, and it's definitely something worth knowing about, so I'll try and condense it down a bit to give you what you need to know. Essentially, with the new system, each tile on the map is defined by what kind of area it is. For example, the refugee camp outside Louisville would be in a military tile, and a suburban street of housing would be a residential tile. Each type of tile will have a radius of influence and a zombie spawn multiplier. Using a military tile as an example, they would have a large radius and a high spawn multiplier. This is then coupled with a randomized element based on the map seed, which subtracts from the spawn multiplier applied by the heat map. If that's a bit confusing, don't worry. All you need to know is that there will be a general expectation of zombie population based on what kind of area you're visiting, and there will also be differences when you visited in a previous playthrough, unless you have literally chosen the exact same seed. This new implementation aims to get rid of those weird edge cases where you'll be in the forest somewhere, but there's also, for some reason, a lot of zombies, which of course doesn't make much sense. Now that you know how the system works, there's a couple of extra tidbits worth knowing about. Firstly, this system is fully functional with all modded maps and will allow for workshop creators to adjust their own heat maps if they aren't happy with the generated results. Secondly, this system will not determine the number of zombies within a building. The interior of buildings is handled entirely separate from this on a different system. Lastly, this is of course an experimental feature and may see some adjustments as time goes on. As a result of its experimental nature, you may see some weird zombie spawns on existing saves, spawns in areas that have previously been cleared, for example, or other such cases. So be careful when loading into your previous saves and be aware that this is the nature of the unstable branch. Okay, with all that said and done, let's get into the other new stuff this update has to offer. The ragdoll physics that were launched as part of the previous update attached to vehicles and firearms-based kills have now been applied to explosive kills as well. To go with this addition, pipe bombs and aerosol bombs have been made much more effective at both damaging and killing zombies. There's also been some fine-tuning applied to the physics behind various types of animations associated with taking hits from different ranged weapon calibers. The larger the caliber, the more impact it will have on physics. The caliber types are shown on screen now, including each variation of ammunition it contains, so you know what kind of effects this will have on your targets. A very interesting new feature has been added to help with crafting. Currently, you can right-click items to research them and learn various crafting recipes. After this update, you will also be able to use these same items to help with actually performing the craft. If you are one skill level short of the requirement, but have one of these items that teaches the recipe when researched, you will now be able to use that item as a guide and complete the craft one level earlier than you would otherwise. There are several new sound effects that have been added in this update, either as entirely new implementations or to replace existing effects. The most important of these is probably the new sound effects for zombies hitting wood objects, which is aimed at helping the player differentiate between the sound of, say, barricade damage and door damage. There are also new sounds for removing wooden planks with crowbars, grabbing a chicken or turkey from a hatchery, new armor hit sounds for firearms and melee, and updated versions of the M16 firing full auto. And lastly, some new wildlife sounds, including wolves and owls, which will not occur until 4 weeks have passed in a playthrough. There's been a nice little quality of life addition when researching items or reading maps from containers. Once you've completed either of these actions, the items used will now automatically be placed back in the container you took them from. The item Aramid Thread has now been added, which can be harvested from bulletproof vests and various other pieces of armor, as well as some other items like firefighter clothing. This includes broken variants of those items, allowing the player to gain something useful even from items that can't be worn anymore. These Aramid threads can be used alongside sinew thread to create several leather and armor crafting recipes. Now, this next one will be something you'll want to know about if you've been experiencing some weird cases of blurry textures at certain zoom levels. There is now a screen filter option under the textures section of the options, which can help to reduce this effect and seems to be relatively successful. This is one of those new implementations that can very easily slip under the radar, so if you know someone who's had this issue, be sure to let them know that this is a new option. Alright, so that's all the important stuff you need to know about in regards to the new additions in this update. Next, we're moving on to a few balancing changes, and there's not a huge amount of them in this patch, so this shouldn't take long, and then we can cover the fixes. Firstly, equipped tissues will now muffle your character coughing. Previously, if I'm not mistaken, these were only used to muffle sneezes, so this will be considered a nice item to find if you're using the smoker trait from now on, and something you'd want to consider having in your secondary slot if you've picked that trait when creating your character. Previously, the stone awl craft was providing the incorrect amount of XP. This has now been fixed. The stone awl recipe can now also be researched from sharp flint flakes. There have been some other crafting updates in this section, including cooking recipes now accepting mixed water, and some rail spike weapon recipes now requiring a drill to craft them. Okay, so this next one is a big one. Vehicle headlights now extend much farther than they did before. There's been a fair amount of criticism on this since build 42 dropped on the unstable branch with its new lighting effects, so I'm really pleased to see this on the list of changes for this update, and the difference is pretty meaningful having tried it myself. No longer will we be forced to stumble around in the dark, as it were, driving at much slower speeds, when in all reality, we would probably just turn on the high beams. There's been a number of changes to existing clothing and how it fits the character. Really, there's not much here that you need to know about in terms of specifics, just that there's some adjustment to how certain clothing items are shown when wearing them, such as wrist jewelry now being visible with more clothing items, and the body location of balaclavas and shemags now being changed. Balaclavas can no longer be worn with baseball caps, hoods, or helmets as a result of this change, which personally I'm not really a fan of, so hopefully this gets adjusted in future to allow for a variety of combinations again. Okay, so with that short list of balancing changes done and dusted, we're now on to the fixes in this update, and as with most of the updates we've seen since the release of Build 42, there are a bunch of fixes in here. I may not be able to cover them all, but I'll make sure to include the few that you need to know about, and as a quick reminder, there is a link to the patch notes in the description if you want to pick through them. Here's the highlights. I think probably the biggest fix in this update is one that a lot of us suffer from, and has definitely plagued my runs for quite some time now. According to the developers, a large number of inventory items on the ground should no longer cause lag spikes when you right-click on them. There may be some random right-click errors that still occur, so the devs have asked for players to report them if they find any that they've missed. Several fixes have been applied to ragdoll physics, which makes sense considering they only came in as part of the last update. This includes a fix to them losing shadows sometimes, a fix that stops them becoming non-lootable, and a fix to stop some zombies from getting back up after they've been shot and then stomped to death in ragdoll. Speaking of being shot, a bug that caused the inability to shoot animals has now been fixed, as well as a fix to ranged weapons accidentally targeting, hitting, and damaging vehicles. A fix has been issued for the issue where characters can stomp or attack a zombie on the ground too early, causing the attack to miss. The devs acknowledge the fix may not be perfect, as this is something they are still currently working on, but that it should help. Various crafting fixes have been applied, such as a fix to farming XP gain, not factoring the health of plants when harvesting into their equation. The butcher hook UI has also been fixed and should now function as intended. There's a lot more in the way of crafting fixes in this update, but honestly, most of them are stuff to do with tags or minor XP fixes that most players likely won't notice. And lastly, and this is purely because I love the wording on this one, I quote directly from the patch notes here: "Fixed hunks not spawning. The world is healing." So that's just about it for this round of patch notes, and as such, that'll be it from me in this video. I know this one isn't as long as my usual videos, but sometimes the patch notes are just a bit shorter, and this is one of those times. That said, I will continue to cover these updates no matter how short or long they may be, and if I've missed anything important from this update, please do share it in the comments for others. Special thank you as always to my Patreon supporters for backing the channel and for joining us on our whitelisted Project Zomboid multiplayer server for just £3 a month. You can find a link to that down in the description if you'd like to join them. Thanks everyone, and I will catch you all in the next one.